Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pop and Prose podcast. My name is Buddy Gott.
And I'm Prose. Oh, no. I'm Lisa Gott. I thought he was Pop and I was going to be Prose.
Oh, I like
Pop
that.
and Prose.
Yeah, and I could just be Pop.
Prose.
Yeah, oh, I like that. That's cute.
Yeah.
You have to, well, you're not going to be on every show, but, maybe you can, well, maybe
Should be,
you should be,
No.
right? Anyway, this is the Pop and Prose podcast. It used to be Gotta Pop, and it was also Gotta Read, and Buddy's Book Buddies, and they all merged together into one show. And I'm thrilled to have you here on the show.
Yeah, but I said, hey, why not just make it Pop and Prose?
It's really her doing there, because I had already come up with a newsletter on Substack called Pop and Prose, in which I said I was going to be covering a little bit of everything, including pop culture and books. So, and then it came time to do the podcast here, and I said, hey. Well, no, you said, hey.
I said, hey.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, so here we are. This is the second show with the Pop and Prose title, and just a quick summary. Like I just said, this show's about pop culture stuff, but it's also about, like movies, music, TV, but also about books and any number of other things. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about books today.
Books.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about a couple that we've both recently read, and we'll share what we're currently reading as well. And who knows if we might talk about anything else. We might throw in like a TV show we're watching at the end.
Maybe.
The mystery is crazy. So
Stay
why don't
tuned.
we start with you, Prose?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit, not to the immediate last book that I read, but the book before that is one of my favorite authors, Colleen Oakley.
Oh yeah, you've read a few by her. Huh?
I've read a lot. I think I'm only just a couple, like 2 behind of all of hers, and she has a new one coming out this year that, of course, I have ordered. But anyways, it was called The Invisible Husband of Frick Island.
Speaking of invisible husbands, you continue. I'm going to grab my water. It's over there. I'm going to be the invisible husband right now.
He is the invisible husband. So what's great about Colleen Oakley, she kind of does, I guess all authors have a unique premise and this is ridiculous. He's trying to...
I was going to sneak into the shot.
You were going to sneak in there.
Okay.
But,
All right, please continue.
Okay. All authors try to have a unique premise, so I don't want to, discount anybody else, but I find hers are really interesting and unique. Like, one of her first books and my first experiences with her was Before I Go, which was a book that was centered around a woman who was terminally ill, and she was married. And the whole book was trying to get her husband set up to move on with life after her, including finding his next potential great love. And that is definitely a very unique
It really is unique.
premise.
I've never heard of that.
It was an Audible book and a fantastic book. Just have tissues because I bawled my eyes out for the last quarter of the book. But anyways, Invisible Husband of Frick Island is also an extremely unique premise. It focuses on Piper Parrish, who lives on Frick Island.
That's a great name.
Yeah, Piper and her husband, Tom. And then there is Anders. He's kind of like the other really kind of main, character. We spend a little bit more time with Anders. Anders is a journalist who comes to the island he's trying to make a career for himself. And, a journalist, people in media, everyone trying to get anywhere in any business has to kind of start at the ground. So he gets thrown these kind of shit stories. So he has to go cover the annual cakewalk or something like that at Frick Island, which he's really not excited about, having to go all the way to this po-hunk place. And there's Bob Dan is a local fisherman, and he's a really interesting character. He's a local fisherman, but he also runs the ferry from the main island to there. So there's a lot of really good interactions between him and Anders. So anyways, Anders comes here, and he really kind of thinks the island is rather unremarkable until he meets Piper. Now, initially, when he meets Piper, there's a little bit of a spark he's attracted to her and he's intrigued by her. But then he starts to become intrigued by her for a different reason, because he notices that she's completely having conversations and reactions with someone who doesn't appear to be there.
Wow.
And not only that, but he starts to realize that other people are very much aware that she's doing this and are actually joining in by asking how this mystery magical person is, and that invisible person is her husband Tom. And so Anders becomes enamored with this, and he goes, oh my God, this is the story. Like, screw the cakewalk and what they want me to do on this.
More interesting
this
than the
is the
cakewalk.
story. So he ends up kind of making it a regular thing where he comes on the weekends to start investigating and kind of poking around and seeing if he can become close enough to Piper to see what's happening and learn, about him. And it's really, there's a lot of kind of clever, funny, quirky characters. So there's some fun moments. I really like Anders.
Sounds like a really great character.
And Piper I liked, but sometimes she was a little frustrating. But it was just a really great, unique premise. It had a lot of different, there's a little bit of mystery and intrigue because you wonder, obviously, I think most people are sitting there thinking, I'm not, doing a spoiler here. It's not like it's an actual, invisible husband, but it's obviously a story that explores kind of to that, like the differences between reality and make-believe,
right,
and trauma, and what that can do to us, grief, and kind of the stages of how all of us kind of deal with things and process things in a different way. But then bigger than that, it's like also a book about community and how community can really become a family. Like, she doesn't really have people there in her corner except for these people on this island. She could go anywhere and start fresh, but they're obviously there for her. And that kind of becomes, a very also intriguing thing to Anders. But I think one of the things that really shocked me, especially towards the end of the book, and again, I'm not giving any spoilers, just general notes, is that the book is also about the importance of media, and kind of maybe even the distance of how far, media should, like, just because there isn't an interesting story about something, should and do a lot of journalists ask themselves questions like, should I be telling it? Right. Is this going to be encroaching on something that's potentially going to be devastating to other people?
Yeah, and like from what I know about this, it seems like it's a very, very personal thing for this woman. So should he be exploiting that in any kind of way?
So I really loved it. There was like a tiny little tickle about 3/4 of the way through where I was like, ooh, I don't really know if I like what just happened there. But, and that seemed really weird and off course for me because, and with Colleen, because, because I know her, but with her writing, but then I just was like, keep going. And she kind of picked everything up and wrapped it all up the way that I kind of expected it to, and even more. And I really enjoyed it. And honestly, if you haven't read anything by Colleen Oakley, you can't go wrong. She's a fantastic author.
Yeah, I know you love her so much, and the reason I just sit here and was nodding my head and smiling a lot is because, being Lisa's husband, I was sitting on the couch next to you a lot as you read. Yeah. So we'll have reading sessions, we'll both sit on our respective sides of the couch next to each other, and, I'll see you reacting to these things, and I remember, you being sort of like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like towards the end.
Yeah.
And then, just being moved by one thing after another in there. So I'm really glad you loved it so much.
So I have some fun, I try to find fun facts about the books that we're sharing, and also the author. So it was really interesting that she actually talks quite a bit about this in the acknowledgments after the end of the book, is that the idea of the book came to her while she was on a ferry to Smith Island, which apparently is in Maryland, which isn't too far away from us.
No, it's not.
But I've never heard of it before. It's apparently...
Maryland's a big state.
Yeah, well, no,
I know. You've heard of Smith Island. I'm sorry.
See what I have to deal with. This is why I read a lot.
Please continue. My apologies.
So apparently this island, Smith Island, is a small isolated island that inspired Frick Island. And what's neat in the ending of the book is she actually shares some of the restaurants she went to and some of the things. And a lot of things obviously are embellishments. I mean, even I can speak to myself, like my thesis novel that I'm working on is kind of loosely inspired by Wilmington, Delaware, where we live. But anybody who reads it is going to realize that I took quite some liberties with shifting some downtown buildings because I really just didn't like the geography to how it was laying out to my head. So I moved things blocks
That's
over.
fun.
So, you know, she obviously took quite a bit of this happens a lot, by the
Sorry.
way. I start talking and he just starts yawning. So hopefully, maybe you should pour yourself a cup of coffee.
What happened there in that
here.
split second is I was remembering someone I dated before I met you, and I was just so bored by even the memory of her.
This is good. That's a good answer. This is a good husband. Yes. I'm going to move this a little bit. So
Yeah.
you're
Oh,
a
that's
little bit
better.
more in the shot. So it's not like half of your head and it's a little frightening.
By the way, this is Ollie.
Oh, yeah, Ollie.
Ollie is our tree.
Okay. So
That probably needs a little explanation.
A is Alexa. We can't say her name out loud because she'll start talking and she really has an attitude sometimes. But she has an attitude sometimes when I ask her to turn Ollie on and off because she knows very well who Ollie is and what she needs to do. But sometimes I'll go, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And I have been known to get a little irate with her. But anyways, back to my fun facts. One thing I wanted to point out for writers who are tuning in here, I'm in my MFA program, and one of the things that they make us do, because they don't know whether or not you're going to be a self-published author or you want to do the traditional route, they kind of train us to think about all of those different options. And so one of the things, especially if you're getting an agent or a publishing company trying to query, is you have to look for book comps, like, you know, comparison books, you know, that you might want to pitch to say, you know, you'll see them on blurbs all the time. For readers of X, Y, and Z, this is a good thing. So it's almost like you as a unpublished author are trying to do that with editors. And so I think, at least me, and I would think some other writers and readers think this, is you'll read a very unique book. Like I read The Collected Regrets of Clover by Miki Brammer.
Yeah, that was very unique.
And you know, you're thinking, I've never heard of her, really. This is good. People like, you know, her with unique premises get picked up by traditional publishers. And then you start to learn a little bit about her and you realize that she's kind of like a pretty big journalist over at Architectural Digest, and you think, well, there's the in there. So that was a very long pivot to bring back to this that Colleen Oakley, and I did not actually know this until today when I started to do a little bit more research on her, is that she was a former magazine editor. So you're starting to see, and I will bring up another connection to the industry in the book that I'll be talking about later tonight, is that, you know, I think it's good for writers to keep that in mind when we feel deflated and unpicked and unloved by those in the bigger industry, is that the people who you think are no names are not. They might be a debut novelist and they might be a no name on the bookshelf, but they are not a no name in the publishing industry, and that is a big thing.
And I think too that can be reassuring to, you know, people who want to write and want to have books published, because you think, you know, why them and not me?
Right.
And it's not that they obviously they have talent or else the book wouldn't be published, but also having some connection sometimes can help.
It helps.
You know people, and you can, you know,
which also goes to the point of try to get yourself into those communities as much as you possibly can. Like I, you know, have already published a book, but also, you know, I hope to teach, you know, on top of that. And becoming a teacher means that maybe I might get more clout in the industry and I can go to conferences or all that. And it starts to make this humongous, scary, big, daunting world get a little bit smaller with every step that you take into it. So, you know, even if you want to be a self-published writer, just start shoving yourself into the writing community, because it'll help with marketing your book and all that. But anyways, I'm getting off, you know, topic. But
that's a good thing to bring up, though. Because even doing something like this, like if you want to talk about books with people, you know, start a podcast or just, you know, get involved in different things online. You never not to say you should do everything with the intention of it's going to help me.
Yeah.
But having fun and having some enjoyment, could lead.
Even doing things like this, like even starting a podcast, kind of makes the community seem a little bit smaller because people start to know who you are. Being just even a guest on a podcast and not running it is another fabulous way. Which, by the way, if you like to read books or talk about pop culture and you're a writer, even if you don't have a book yet out, this is a great opportunity to start building that platform.
Yeah, in my last show, I had interviewed an author. I interviewed Joe Shinakis about his latest book. And
one of my professors.
That's right. A wonderful guest. But in some shows, I like to do that kind of thing. But others, I like to just talk to people about books or talk to people about movies or music. So, maybe we can find something to talk about. You don't have to be an author or a musician. If you're a book lover, shoot me an email at buddygotwrites.com. And or if you're an author, I would love to have you on the show to talk. Yeah.
So anyway, you're welcome. So that was The Invisible Husband of Frick Island. I really enjoyed it, and like I said, Colleen Oakley is an auto buy for me. There have been numerous times I bought a book and haven't even read the blurb because I know that she's not going to disappoint. She's while the premises of her book are each like wildly unique, so it wouldn't really carry a thread to another one. Her writing really is very touching. It's humorous at times. I wouldn't say they're comedy, pieces, but she does have some humor, lighthearted. There's always, just really gut-wrenching emotion from all over, from happy, sad, angry, loving, romantic, all of it is really there.
I really need to read her sometime soon.
Yeah, so I recommend The Invisible Island of... The Invisible Island. Well, there's The Invisible Island of...
Oh, that could be a
Frick's husband. That's a whole new spin-off series. So with that, I'm going to turn the page over to him.
Well, that sounds wonderful, and I do want to read that. And if not that, I'm going to read something by her because I know how much you love her.
We have a ball.
I know. Well, first, I am going to talk about a book that I recently read, and that is, I'm going to hold it up here. This isn't going to help you who are listening. It's not going to help you who are listening to the audio version, but it is... it's the wrong damn book. I have Holmes, Marple, and Poe here.
I knew
this is actually. Oh, you did you?
But I was like, I guess I didn't know, which is why I didn't say anything. I thought maybe he might be, really going back in time to describe the connection. Well,
anyway, it is a good connection because what I just showed you was the first book in this series, and the one that I got to talk about that too. The name of the series has apparently changed. Originally, the series was going to be Holmes, Marple, and Poe as a series, and that was going to be the name of the first book. But then with the second book, which is Holmes is Missing, you might see the subtitle there, is that it is now a Holmes, Margaret, and Poe mystery.
Which doesn't make sense to me. And I haven't read these. I'm actually curious to read them, contrary to how you seemed sometimes while reading it. But
well, Margaret is the Marple from the first book, and that's the characters in these. Let me just tell you they're not Sherlock Holmes. It's not Miss Marple, whatever her first name was, but they share the same last name, the surname, but different first names. It's now in this century, in approximately 2025, but it's Brendan Holmes, Auguste or August Poe. We talked about this before. I'm not really sure how to say his name, but it's August, but with an E at the end. I think it's Auguste. And then Margaret Marple and August.
I don't know. I'm trying to go through it in my head, but as I don't always ever pronounce things correctly, so I'm thinking it's kind of like a German kind of.
I think so too. Auguste, and he's like kind of a smug little bastard at times, so I can see him like really playing up the pronunciation of his name. But these characters are. They're all private investigators, and obviously they share the same last names as some very famous, characters. Of course, you have Sherlock Holmes, Miss Marple, but Poe is based on Edgar Allan Poe, the writer, so that's the only one that's not named after a character. But Edgar Allan Poe is often credited as being one of the first writers of detective stories, back in the 1800s. So what's interesting in the first book is you don't really know who these people really are. You know that those are not their real names. You know that they are fans of the books and of the author Poe. But they take on these names, but there's big mystery as to who they really are. You don't know if maybe they were like some sort of secret agents or in the military. And what happens is they become private investigators. They run a very in the first book. They start off in New York City. Their detective agency is solving one big case after another. They seem like they are like the masterminds and crime-solving geniuses that are, just like where they got their namesakes. And the first book was really good. I enjoyed that quite a bit. It had multiple mysteries in it. I think there were 3 or 4 different storylines in it. And I don't know if I said this, but it's by James Patterson and Brian Sitz. And if you've read Patterson before, well, the guy just doesn't write many books, so this is such a rare thing for him.
Yeah, only like 20 or 30 a day get published. That's what it feels like in my email box.
I know. He's always got something, and he works with so many other writers. But I was going to say with that is that I've read maybe 3 or 4 of his books, but this one was structured the same way in that most of the chapters are rather short. Quite a few of them leave you on some sort of cliffhanger, so you kind of want to keep turning the pages. I admire him. I've admired that about him for quite some time, that he does that kind of writing, because it is very compelling. Like I said, the first book I really loved quite a bit. I had some issues with it because some of the mysteries that are there about the characters were not resolved at the end of the first book, and I knew it was supposed to be the start of a series, so it didn't bother me a lot, but it still bothered me some.
Well, and I know we talked about sometime at the time that there was so much going on that sometimes it was hard to kind of keep a grasp of what was. Yeah. And I made a mental note to myself that this was a book that was not suited to reading in small spurts, not regularly.
Yes.
It's a book where you want to kind of have time to sit down and sink your teeth into.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And I think it's one that if you do step aside from it, which I did with Holmes is Missing, it kind of got me in trouble where when I came back to it, I'm like, I need to go back a few chapters.
Well, because it's not even just one plot line.
No, you have to be reminded of the 3 or 4 different plot lines that are going on. So I was looking forward to this second book. And it's interesting. When this book was being advertised, they gave it a tagline in the advertisements where it said, Holmes is Missing, the most requested sequel of James Patterson's career, which I thought was kind of an odd thing to put in the advertising. I mean, maybe it's the truth. I would imagine it is, because I know the first book had thousands of reviews. And I don't know, to me that was almost a little...
He's written a lot of books.
Yeah, he's written a lot of books.
Yeah.
But regardless of that kind of odd marketing technique there, I was very excited about this book. And when I started it, right from the beginning, I liked it, but there was something that frustrated me right from the get-go. And I wish I could tell you what that is, because...
Especially me, because here's me, I'm going, I was kind of interested in reading this series, but I don't even know what's happening now. And
maybe I could say something.
Maybe you could say something.
Yeah, I'm gonna spoil something, but it's something that you're gonna discover within the first couple of chapters yourself.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, Holmes isn't really missing in this book.
Oh,
he's not. The title is very deceptive. It starts off with, in the first book, that much like Sherlock Holmes, Brendan Holmes has he has problems with drugs, and he's trying to battle that in the first book. And this book starts out with seeing that he is actually, while I said the team works in New York City, he's off, and I think it's upstate New York, at some rehab place. So he's been there for multiple months. And back home, Poe and Marple are getting involved in a new case, but they know that Brendan's about to leave this place. He's done his time there, so he's about ready to come home. They start this new case for, I want to say, just 1 or 2 days before they go and get him. And while they're starting this case, people are like, where's Holmes at? And they don't say, because, it's a private thing that he's in a rehab place. But then they go and get him. And Marple and Poe know all along where Holmes is. So he's not technically missing. He's just missing from not being at the scene with them while they start this case. So
now let me ask you.
Yeah.
Do you think they meant it metaphorically? Like, was he kind of checked out, or maybe not 100% into
Well, you
what?
know, I didn't really think about that, but that could be it. Because
This is what happens because school makes me think about all
no,
of this stuff.
that's really
Yeah.
an interesting way to look at it. Because let's face it, even when someone has gone through like the process of rehabilitating and coming off of drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, you're not 100%. And yes, Brendan Holmes is not 100% when he comes back, and he does have his struggles throughout the book. So maybe that's something right there.
So maybe I could join the team because I just solved a mystery.
Yeah, that's right. Or you could work with James Patterson. You know, he's got a lot of co-writers.
Maybe, except I would be frightened to keep up with his speed. Like,
Yeah.
you know, sorry, I need 67 chapters by tomorrow. Okay.
That could really be good for us financially.
Yeah.
One of us should write a book
Well,
with
really,
him.
yeah. I mean, so sorry to my full-time job because I'd probably be like, see ya.
But anyway, much like the first book, this one does have a couple different mysteries going on. Actually, the main storyline in this, well, one of the, I guess, 2 or 3 main storylines, is quite compelling. It actually involves infants who go missing from this hospital in New York City, where I forget how many are missing. It's let's say half a dozen. It's somewhere around there. But they all
Crawled away?
They didn't crawl away. Well, we don't know. You don't know if they crawled away. You know, that's not something that the team brings up, but they could have crawled away. But they're not in the hospital where they're supposed to be. Their parents are freaking out.
Infants are missing.
Yeah, oh my God, infants are missing. Maybe one of them had a name.
Everybody
Holmes,
is missing.
Everybody is missing. Yeah, maybe they're on the invisible island. But yeah, it's quite a compelling storyline there because the police are, of course, investigating it. But Poe, his girlfriend is actually a detective with the police force. We met her in the first book. Her name is Helene Gray. And
name.
Yeah, it is a great name. Gray with an EY at the end, you know.
Fancy.
So it is fancy. And they've got a sort of complex relationship. If they were on Facebook together, I'm sure it would say that it was complicated. Yeah. So she kind of alerts them that this situation is going on, that they should come and help at the hospital because she knows what masterminds they are. The team has an interesting relationship with the police department. The police department, on one hand, was very grateful that they helped them solve all the cases in the first book. But then again, it kind of took away stuff from the police where a lot of people were like, well, what are the police there for? Why is this team of just regular people able to solve it and you're not? So it's kind of this contentious relationship. You have that going on, and then there's something else going on with Brendan Holmes. There's the stuff with him maybe being missing in his head, you know, where he's dealing with struggles. But then throughout this book, he becomes involved in a separate case that the others don't know about yet. With this really interesting character who may or may not be some sort of criminal mastermind himself. Oh. You don't know that.
Like a Moriarty.
Yeah, maybe like
thing.
Yeah, sort of like you get those kinds of vibes. Yeah, that I had that while reading it. But then again, you don't know if maybe he's just some guy who's trying to help him out because he wants to solve a mystery himself. So there's multiple storylines going on. For the most part, I liked it quite a bit. But there were little things creeping up throughout the book that kind of had me, I don't know, a little frustrated. There was the whole thing about, too, like I'm several chapters into this. I'm like, well, you know, I thought, is Holmes still going to go missing at some point? You know, because
so almost like an anticipation that never really gets, you know.
Or maybe it does, but I've already let the cat out of the bag. He's not missing, you know, so that's kind of deceptive. So, and even in the blurb for the book, it kind of implies that he's not there with them, like something's happened to him.
So maybe it's a case, if they did meet it metaphorically, maybe it's a case of they probably should have reworded it.
They probably should have reworded that. So, folks, if you're
Now, let me ask you something, because I'm curious, these alternate different storylines and everything. I don't read a lot of series books, mainly because it's a joke I make about a lot of things. I have commitment issues, except for when it comes to him.
Thank goodness.
And coffee and our local donut shop. But, you know, these multiple storylines, are they all individual, or do they have some sort of intersecting?
In the first book, there was a couple that were totally separate, but then a couple that did link up. In this one, well, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
This one has less storylines than the first book. There is one storyline in here, though, that to me seemed like it was a pretty big deal because it involves like the past history of one of the characters. And something is revealed that is monumental, I think, and I think it would be to most people if this thing was discovered about their life and maybe someone in an earlier part of their life. But it's kind of glossed over rather quickly in this.
So maybe there's some potential for dangling things in the rest of the series.
Yeah, maybe there
something.
is. Yeah, because there was stuff that came up that I'm like, wow, this is really huge. But then it was just kind of like left alone.
Now, you had mentioned in the first book there were a couple things that weren't kind of wrapped up by the end of this. Now, were they wrapped up at the beginning of this?
No.
Were they even referenced
They were
at all?
barely referenced.
Now that's interesting.
They were. And that, to me, is, I can't remember if I said this earlier, but it's basically finding out who these people are.
Oh, okay.
There was a hint in the first book as to what their background may be. There was no even mention of that hint again in this one.
That's an interesting...
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think, because you wouldn't want... because, I mean, really, they say, at least some of the things that I see, that the best series, while there might be... Like, I'm going to use the Gamache series as an
Louise
example.
Penny, right?
Louise Penny. Like, there are tiny little personal plot lines in relation to, like, Inspector Gamache that are kind of ongoing. Like, that character development kind of... But largely, you could pick up any book of the series, and really... she does a good, and most authors who write these, especially these humongous series, are really good about kind of paraphrasing and summarizing what you need to do to fill the gap in quickly. Because I noticed that in like books 2 and 3 of the Gamache series, there were things that she mentioned that happened in the first book that she very quickly and very succinctly like kind of wrapped up in a few sentences, so that you could tell people who hadn't read that would quickly be able to do that.
Yeah.
Well, but you really should largely be able to pick up a book and read it from the beginning to end and not need the series.
Yes.
So it wouldn't make sense to me that they would have these dangling storylines that might not be resurfaced until like the 6th book, because then you kind of have thrown... You can't. You have to read them in order, because there's no way that you would ever. You might pick up, like, if they do ever bring those storylines back in like book 6.
Yeah.
You know, and this is all fables because I'm making it up.
But no, that's
you would have
true.
A spoiler in that book, which would ruin the first book. So it's kind of an interesting choice.
Yeah, it is an interesting choice, and I've seen others online in reviews have problems with it.
Yeah.
I've seen some people just give 5 stars and say they loved every single page of the book, and I know I'm complaining a lot here, and it probably seems like I didn't love these books. I did thoroughly enjoy both of them. This one I struggled with more than the first one, because I did have those frustrations. I know you did. And it's still, there's some really good writing in here, some good cliffhangers. I'm not 100% sure I'd read the 3rd book. I might have to see what the plot is of that.
And I'm starting to wonder if I'm even going to read them all.
I'm sorry if I ruined it for you or any of you.
Well, I think you just like, I think every reader knows themselves, or they should know themselves. And there's like, I have to think a lot in my life. Like, my day job requires a lot of thinking. School requires a lot of thinking. So when I read, it's not like I'm an ignorant reader, but when I read, even if it's a mystery, I don't really want to have 27 of them. Like, I don't want to be managing an entire police department and having to keep up on who's doing what and doing that. That just is not my thing. No. I mean, that's why I hate to say it, a lot of the times I don't read fantasy or sci-fi. I have to be in the right mood for that, which you're going to probably brush upon with what you're currently reading.
Yes.
Is I have to be in a mindset where I'm like, okay, I am dedicating like 110% of me when I sit down and read this, where most of the time, I just want to, I don't want to have to work that hard.
No. I mean, books are like, very similar.
But some people love that.
Oh yeah.
So that's the great thing about shows like this, and even reading reviews sometimes, is that you learn. Like, for me, I might hear that and be like, I kind of know that's a book that I probably wouldn't even touch until after I was done with school.
Yeah.
Or not in the middle of trying to finish a novel.
Exactly.
But another person might go, "Ooh, I love puzzles and being able to pick apart lots of different plot lines."
Exactly.
So.
And we're not saying we don't like things that are like deep or complex in any ways. I think you just, you have to be in the right mindset too. But also you want to have things like this one here, where maybe things are being explained enough that you're not just constantly wondering. Like you explained it perfectly earlier, saying, someone like Louise Penny will sprinkle in enough that you know enough about these characters' past. And I've seen that too, like the Lawrence Block series that I read, the Matthew Scudder book, which made me a fan of him. I think I came into that like the 5th or 6th book into the series. And he said enough about the earlier things that, I knew enough to read that story. But, not too much that I didn't want to go back and read the others.
Yeah.
So I think that it has to be very delicate and cleverly done.
That's the great thing about that genre, is it's not like general contemporary fiction or literary fiction where it's mostly character driven, where those types of series you probably wouldn't read out of order, because if you're dealing with character development and and that's where you are inside a character's head the entire time, it would be very difficult to have standalone things. But that's the great thing about mysteries, is it's a case.
Yes, exactly.
You see it on TV shows, and it's the same thing,
Yeah. And it's interesting because so many writers will do it differently. Some of the most popular TV shows on TV now are much more centered on the stories than the characters. I know we've joked about that with maybe why we don't get into a show like, say, a Law and Order as much as some other shows we might
also,
like.
I work in law firms, so...
so you don't want to be anywhere near them.
I've spent my whole life around lawyers. Love them, thank you, but yes.
One last thing I'll say about this is, I hope, if you were interested in this, that I did not deter you from it. If you haven't read the series at all, I do highly recommend the first one, Holmes, Marple, and Poe. And see what you think about that, because you might love that and want to get into the second book. And the second one is good. It's really good. I told you some of my issues with it. And so we will move on to Lisa's next book.
Oh. I have the actual physical book. The Maid. By Nita Prose.
Nita Prose.
One
she
thing...
could be on the show, Pop and Prose.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was thinking about this today when I was doing the fun facts about her, and I was kind of like, it was, oh my God. First of all, just for a moment, let's take a break and talk about how adorable his water tumbler is.
Oh, well, thanks. She got it for me.
It's a little guy. I swear to God, it is Buddy. If he was an animated figure, he would be on a skateboard going, woo.
Remember you telling, I had told you not too long ago that when I was a child, I had a couple of skateboards, and I think that made you think that's probably
we drink out of these. Mine has poo, not the bad kind on it, but Winnie the Pooh. We got these because I love cold water, and they're stainless steel, so they keep...
Oh my God, they stay cold
all day long for like 11 hours.
Yeah.
But also we share we are roommates with the owner of our place, which is a cat.
Tomlin.
And when we had tumblers of water, he would stick his paw in it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, I have to get a new thing of water. Well, he can't drink out of straws yet. He's trying to figure it out because he sniffs it and he looks around and he's like, I know there's water in there. But anyways,
So
the one thing that with Nita Prose that I didn't look up that I kind of wanted to is to know if that is her real name or it is a pen name.
It's a wonderful name.
Because Nita Prose, obviously prose is, writing, but then Nita, it kind of sounds like neat writing.
Oh,
and what is interesting, I'm going to share a fun fact about her before I even tell you anything about the book. But the fun fact about her, kind of in the same vein as I was talking about how Colleen Oakley was an editor, Nita Prose is an editor.
Oh.
She spent her
wow.
her whole, she has a huge background in publishing. So again, here's another author who you might initially, before you learn anything about it, go, oh wow, another debut author of a nice Reddit. But see, she's ingrained in that industry, and it does thing. But so it made me wonder, I wonder if that's her, because I was like, I could see somebody who's an editor to want to have their name sound like Neat Prose.
Yes, exactly. I love that. But, Neat Prose.
Anyways, The Maid.
Yeah, let's tell us about that.
This
Please.
book, I have kind of a long. I don't even remember when this was initially published. Let's look here. It was initially published in 2022.
Oh, okay.
Now I follow a lot of book things. We get Book Page, I follow everything online, and so I learned
all kinds of emails every day.
Yeah, I learned about this book long before it was published because it was obviously a buzzy book that people were talking about. And I was initially kind of curious about it. But I actually was curious about the wrong book because I was curious. I thought it was the same book, but what I was actually thinking of was Frida McFadden. Because there's all these maids have like broken out, housemaids, regular maids. Is that what hers is,
the housemaid?
It's like the decade of maids and house servants. Not servants, they're not servants, but you know what I mean. So, which I did read, The Housemaid, which was great. I liked this one better. I'm sorry, Frida McFadden. It's a different choice of things. Anyways, when I realized that, I was like, well, let me check it out and see. And I read the blurb, and I was really curious about it, mainly because the protagonist's name, who is the maid, is Molly Gray. And my dog, my beloved first dog growing up, was named Molly. So I kind of, that kind of spoke to me, and I felt like it was a sign that I was supposed to do it. Well, then, I know you're not supposed to judge a book by covers and reviews and all that other stuff, but I do like to look at reviews a little bit to get an idea. Because if, everyone in the world says it's 5 stars, that's going to make me wonder.
Yes.
Is this just you have a lot of friends?
Yeah.
Or is this like a cult following that's just going to automatically give you 5 regardless of whether or not the book has any, issues or whatever with it? Because unfortunately, I have read these massive blockbusters that have like 20,000 reviews and 4.9, and I read it and I'm like, huh?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I know I'll glance the reviews. I won't read the reviews themselves, but I kind of look at like the star ratings and just to see if there's, I like you, I think kind of want to find something more towards the middle.
Yeah, because
it's got a little bit of everything.
Because also in that same vein, if you start seeing a book and all of them are 1, 2, this person doesn't know how to write, they don't know English,
exactly.
not meaning as a language thing, but like grammar type of English things, it starts to make you think, well, did the author, and I hate to say this, I'm going to make a tiny little pivot to book covers. I judge books by the book cover. And, I was a self-published author the first time around, and I paid $200 to get an amazing book cover.
That cover was beautiful.
When my publisher went under and I made a new cover for the other one, I think I paid about $50, and I designed it myself, and it still looked, nice.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, I am gonna pick on indie authors a little bit who don't spend the time or the financial, give it the financial support that it needs to do it. And I would encourage writers to do that because it's kind of like the receptionist at a business. It's your first introduction to the reader, and it's. Unfortunately, as a reader, do you know what it says to me is I don't care.
Yeah.
I really don't care about anything I put in here, so I don't really think that you should care either.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be much. It can be very simple. I mean, if you look at half of the book, we talked about this the other day, half of the books, I mean, even The Maid, there's hardly any graphic on it.
Yeah.
It's just this tiny little thing. It's just, but it's clean and it's cohesive.
Yeah.
It's not like the font is this big and I need a magnifying glass and everything's crooked.
Something like that can still be memorable. You know, I think of a classic book like The Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
It was just it was so generic. It was just basically, I think it was yellow lettering on a red background.
Yeah.
And but yet there's something striking about that.
Yeah.
But indie authors in particular, I think some need to. It's like the old saying goes: just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do it.
Yeah.
I think some people figure, oh, I can make this cover. Yeah, wait.
It's worth waiting. Yeah. It's worth saving up the money, even if it's just $50. To do something simple. Yeah. Even if you're just paying for someone to do the front, and you just have a plain solid color on the back for your blurb and your picture. Right. But anyways, all that to say that I was looking at, reviews, and when this book first came out, the reviews overwhelmingly were not super great. They weren't like 1s and 2s by far, but they were on the lower end of the 3 scale. And that, I generally am looking for a book to kind of veer towards 3.5 and up. especially a big blockbuster book, because I feel like if it's a big blockbuster book and it can't even get to that, like what, I mean, it's not going to be formatting, it's not going to be editing, because this is a traditional publishing house that's doing it, which means it comes down to the story.
Yeah, something's just not connecting with people.
Yeah, so at first, people were like, this is the most boring, I skimmed the reviews because I don't want spoilers and stuff. People were saying it was the most boring mystery they'd ever read. Whatever, I couldn't let it go because of the Molly thing and because I was interested in it. And I'm really glad that I've come to say it's fine to look at those things, but I also have enough expertise in reading that I should trust myself and also give an author a shot, because sometimes people are writing different stories. And I think the readers weren't paying attention to a very specific thing the publisher was pushing, which is probably the most important genre piece that you need to know about this book, is that it is flagged as a mystery literary fiction novel. So anyone who may or may not know anything about literary fiction is much more character driven. It is not a plot-based book. It doesn't mean that there's not a plot, because a lot of books are hybrids now.
Right, exactly.
But it just means that the character development is going to take the front seat through a lot of the book. It's not going to have the fast pacing that you might see in a thriller and all that other stuff.
You're not going to have someone walk into a gun every chapter. Walk into a room with a gun in it with every chapter.
You're gonna have a lot. So anyways, I went from one end of the spectrum, I don't know if I'm going to do this, to I bought both books that were out at the time, the first and second one. I do this a lot.
We do that a lot.
The Gamache book came out. I bought the entire series. There were 19 of the books out at the time, so I'm a little insane. But anyways, it's about this maid, Molly Gray. And one of the things that I absolutely love about this book is that Molly is about as unique of a character as it could possibly get. She's kind of in a lot of ways an underdog. And she gives off a lot of neurodivergent qualities. I have read some things where they have asked the author, did she intend for the character to be neurodivergent? And she didn't. She was just writing about a character who had social cue issues. Like, Buddy's supposed to take his pill, which he already took that now.
We do that every evening at 7:30 for me to remember to take my pills. And actually, I didn't, so I'm glad I heard that.
Okay, well, we will do that after
the show.
It's very important. Last time it was the cat food reminder. We have a lot of reminders because we're getting old and we can't remember anything anyways. I can't even remember neurodivergency. So Molly she has a hard time reading people. And I have to be honest, I really connected with that because I am a very dramatic, overly kind of like zesty person. I don't know. So I feel like I should have been Italian. He has like 20% Italian. I have nothing. But on
the flip side, I'm a little harder to read sometimes.
Yeah, he's very hard, especially when he has a beard. His facial expressions are so small that when his beard muffs it, and I can't read the expression. And if someone doesn't have like a big response or a big emotive kind of reaction, I struggle to understand the tone and all that with people, which is probably why I don't do well online with some things. Like certain words will tip me off, like interesting. I automatically read interesting like interesting. That's how I read it. And I know that a lot of people might mean, oh, interesting, but you can't. So all that to say, Molly she has a hard time reading people and she has a hard time interacting with people. Also, she was raised by her grandmother, who she calls Gran. And the book opens where, we spend quite a bit of time with her. I mean, obviously a murder happens pretty immediate, right? Like traditional mysteries happen. The book starts, there's someone dead. But then usually you're dealing with a book that has an investigator or a sleuth or something like that who you're doing. The investigator in this, Detective Spark, is such a very small character in this. I mean, we spend very little time, not even with her. The book is written from first person point of view, from Molly's point of view. And so really, like, I want to say I was probably close to 100 pages into the book before we really started to get into much of the thought process of what was happening and who may or may not be.
Okay.
I will be curious to see in the next book how that pacing compares to this,
Right.
because this first book we're getting to know Molly, and she is a quirky individual, and it takes time. Like, some people are easier to read and understand than others, and Molly is one that you need to sit down with and kind of spend some time with her to understand it. And to understand that, you have to learn a lot about her gran, who had unfortunately passed away previous to this book starting. So we're dealing with a character who's grieving, but it's also a character who's grieving who may not even be able to completely process her own emotions, with that. Just like she has a hard time kind of taking social cues from others and knowing how others are dealing with it.
I really like the sound of her.
Yeah, she's just,
really
I just really, like, in some ways it's almost like an underdog. Like, you're rooting for her because she talks about how maids are absolutely insignificant. Like, people don't even realize that they're there, but they're human beings. And I think it's like such a great reminder for probably things that all of us do. I'm thinking of cash register, not the actual cash registers. They do a lot. They hold money.
And they have feelings too.
The cashiers at places, everyone who has, even the people who pick up your trash in front of your house. I think there are so many people who are dismissed, and maybe not on purpose.
No.
But I think, she feels also, because she is different and she reacts differently, because this was another thing that I could really relate to with her is I'm an only child. So, and my parents were older. Not like the oldest, but my mom was almost 30 when she had me. So she wasn't like, 19 or 21 or something like that. And, being an only child, there weren't a lot of children in my family. Everybody was older. I spent most of my time with senior citizens and older people and my parents, which did make me mature faster. I probably, I was always advanced in reading and all that, probably because I learned vocabulary from adults being around them. But it also meant that I listened to music that wasn't popular or even known to people who were from my generation. He is almost 15 years older than me, and I know more music from the 60s than he does.
It's crazy, we'll be driving in the car listening to one of those like 60 stations.
And I know 90% of what's coming on, if not more. And I know the words to the music, and it's because I grew up on that music because that was playing. So Molly, similarly, grew up around her gran. And so her grandmother listened to old jazz music, dealt with, different kind of, her gran was kind of a unique personality too, but she was very proper. Like, she was also a maid for a very high-end, household. She was like a housemaid. So there was a lot of like, fanciness to her grandmother and the way that she talks. And so one of the things that I just thought was funny, but also just heartwarming, was the way that Molly she knocks on the door like maids do in hotels, because she works for, it's called the Regency.
In
my head, it's kind of like the Plaza. It's got the red carpet out front, everybody dressed. She even very meticulously describes like her outfit, it's the black skirt, crisp, tight things, not like, something at like Holiday Inn, no offense to them. But, so she will knock on the door and she'll be like, "Is now a good time for me to return your room to a state of perfection?"
I love that.
Okay, this is modern day.
Wow, I love that.
So who talks like that?
That sounds like something you'd see in like Downton Abbey or something.
So we, of course, me as a reader, I'm thinking, oh, that's so endearing. But think about how that would be in reality if someone actually talked to that. You would probably, your knee-jerk reaction would be, what a weirdo.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately that is Molly's thing, which just endears you more to her because she's very eloquent. She, there's a scene later in the book where she has to supposedly text somebody, and somebody's writing a text on behalf of her using like lingo and abbreviations, and someone's like, "Okay, that does not sound like Molly. You need to make it prettier. You need to make it sound like poetry or something," because that's just how she is. See, I'm talking again, and it's just really entertaining.
No, I'm sorry.
maybe he's one of the ones who left one of those reviews saying that they were bored. But anyway, so the person who is killed at the beginning of the book is a man called Mr. Black. And he is an older man who comes into town every month and spends a week at the hotel. So, and he has a much young, you're seeing a thread here that we see all the time in real life. The rich, powerful older guy with the wife that's probably the age of his children, if not younger. And her name is Giselle.
Oh, wow. That's a great name.
So Molly is kind of their dedicated maid. She is often requested to go there and do that, and she's tipped very highly. And so she gets to know them. Not so much Mr. Black, but Giselle, she kind of has a little bit of a relationship with. So the book starts off with him passing, but then we kind of take a sidestep to that storyline, and we kind of go through the steps of her dealing with the early maybe press of that happening, and potentially having to be called by the police to come, take a witness and all that other stuff. And one of the things that's immediately interesting about her character is that because she doesn't take social cues, doesn't understand social cues well, as a reader, I'm sitting there in some situations going, oh, Molly, you're misreading that situation, because it's something that other people take for granted, that you can tell when someone is maybe pulling a stunt with you,
right.
Or maybe you're not trusting someone when you should, and the opposite, and all that. So there's a lot of that, which I think is just really very interesting.
Yeah, sounds very interesting.
And it really, the book kind of shows that, some of these things, by the way, just like with everything that we all deal with, can be signs of a weakness, but they can also be a strength in a lot of ways. And I think that's the beauty of this book, is it kind of unveils a lot of interesting personality traits with her, but then shows how things can be, in one vein, they can be difficult because she may have a trouble with social cues, so she doesn't pick up on things. But then in another vein, she's a meticulous maid, so she has unbelievable attention to detail, which can be a nitpicky thing for people, but it also, from a detective and cleaning situation, can be a positive. So it's really, really good how they throw all that together.
It sounds really, really good.
But so the book really doesn't start picking up as far as starting to draw some definitive lines between things that start make you going, really, I mean, it's a 285 page book until around 100 pages in.
Okay.
So I think this is probably where maybe some of the reviews of the slowness of the pacing might be there, but I don't know how there's any other way that her story could have been told than the way that it is. So I just say this as kind of like we were talking with the Holmes and Marple thing. Know what you like and everything.
Yeah.
And this is a book that requires a little bit of patience. It's not going to be the pacing does pick up as we move towards the climax of the story and we kind of get into the investigative mode. It does pick up. I will say this book made me bawl at one point, and it was really surprising to me because it was just such a somewhat shocking event that I learned, but also really emotional and deeply moving in so many different ways. And there's really not much more I can say about it because it's a pretty big, it really is a pretty big point of her plot, like the plot line of her individual life. But then the ending of it, I mean, literally up until it was the last page of the book, did I not fully know about one aspect of something. So it really was,
that's really something.
From a mystery standpoint, I thought it was fantastic. Again, take my review for what it's worth because I am not a mystery. I read mostly thrillers and regular contemporary fiction and literary fiction, but I thought for a literary mystery, if I wrote a book like this, I'd literally buy something so I could just pat myself on my back all the time because I just love it so much.
And I think, well, first of all, that sounds wonderful, and I'm glad you didn't tell, even off air, I'm glad you didn't tell me much more about it because I want to read that one very soon. I'm going to start that in the next few weeks probably. But I think you touched upon something that is good for readers to always keep in mind too, is that it can kind of behoove you to read the jacket of a book, or maybe look a little bit at reviews to see if the book is really for you. Because I would guess that a lot of people who slam that book, like you said, we're maybe expecting something more like a James Patterson book, or more like some other traditional mysteries where, you know, it's just one kind of cliffhanger after another, and maybe not so much a literary mystery. So yeah, it can help you to, you know, we've all done that. Started something where it just wasn't quite what we wanted it to be, even if it was good.
Yeah.
You know, but that sounds fantastic.
Well, I just wanted to say one other, like,
you got
just
some
to
other fun
add,
facts?
just other fun facts is that this book was inspired by actually Nita Prose's observations at hotels.
Oh.
She realized how maids were completely ignored and not heard and all that, and that gave her the inspiration for the book. And then the other thing that I thought was interesting, especially since we were talking about Holmes, Marple, and Poe, which obviously has some ties to some literary things. This was the character of Molly Gray was partially inspired by classic literary heroines like Eleanor Oliphant.
Oh.
Like Eleanor Oliphant is fine. I never read that book. I actually was curious about it, but I never read that. And also Arthur Hastings, which is in Perot. I can never say his name right. Hercule Poirot.
From Agatha Christie's book.
Which I sadly have not really read any of that, so I don't really have anything more to say that. But then also there is a film adaptation of The Maid. Universal Pictures, I think, is the one that's producing it, and I think it was supposed to be out initially in 2024. But the things I saw. Was that it was due to be released next year in 2026.
Okay.
And the actress playing Molly is Florence Pugh, and we saw her. She's been in a lot of different things, but we saw her, I think, most recently in Oppenheimer.
Oh, yes.
If you saw Oppenheimer had a wife and a mistress, and Florence Pugh played his mistress.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
so she is playing.
I hear her name a lot.
Yeah.
She's really been.
And I thought, I was like, from remembering her in that movie and how she was, I was like, I could see her really nailing Molly's unique personality.
Oh, that's
so
fantastic.
I'm going to be excited to see that. So anyways, I ramble.
And what's fun is you finished that last night, right?
I did.
Or the night before.
Yes.
And you have already started the next book.
The Mystery Guest.
And I know you've just read a chapter so far, right?
Yeah, just the prologue, and that's it. So I'll be diving into that a lot this weekend. And there's a Christmas novella that was released, I think, last year. That we have that, which I will be doing that. And then I believe it is March 11th. I think it's March 11th or April 11th. No, not March 11th.
April.
It's April. April 11th, I think, is the date that the next full novel is coming out with that. So I will obviously be getting that.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you have
I love Molly.
Like
I'm happy to see that now the reviews have picked up for the book quite a bit, and there is a cult following for Molly. We joined, and I'll take another pivot and then I'll shut up, but I talk a lot.
We joined,
everybody's probably heard of Goodreads, but
Goodreads
we joined Fable. Which is an alternate to Goodreads, and I am so in love with it. And Buddy, we talked about when we individually share this video around, we're gonna share a link. Whenever we share it in the comments, look for the link to join Fable, because you get a $5 credit towards a book. Yeah. It's a great thing. It's like social media built into it.
It's really impressive.
I just love it so much, and it has little streaks which inspire you to do it. I just really. I love Goodreads, and I don't hate Amazon as much as everyone else sometimes does. However, I don't like what they've done with Goodreads. It's kind of seemed to be a place where they just plug their books and that's it. And I'm not really into that. So.
No. One thing that's neat though is, and a lot of people, avid readers, have been with Goodreads for years, is that if you sign up for Fable, you can actually import all your book information from
easily.
Goodreads very easily.
Yeah.
So if you already had to read lists on there, or books that you've written, is it your reviews too?
Yeah.
I think?
Yes, everything. Oh, and also, it's not just books.
Oh yeah,
It's TV shows.
TV shows
And I think it's just TV shows, not
Yeah.
movies, I think. But
it's
anyways,
just TV
like
shows,
we
but-
we're in the middle of we're gonna watch it after we get done with this Severance.
Yeah.
And there's like
Show is
a club that I joined on there
Yeah.
where everybody talks about the latest episodes and all that. So
Yeah,
it's a great thing.
Check
Fable.
it out, Fable. It's really great. Now, speaking of books that you've read, there is the book that I most recently finished reading. We've had in our house since it was, you might have seen the BOTM on Lisa's book. She's a member of the Book of the Month Club. This was a Book of the Month selection back in 2023. I think it was spring or summer of 2023. You absolutely loved it. You devoured it. And you said that I should read. You recommended it to me, and it took me almost 2 years to read it.
Oh yeah, and I nagged him about this incessantly, so much so that it's been sitting on the console table in our living room for about almost the entire time.
Yeah.
And I'd be every time he'd finish a book and say, "I wonder what I'm going to read next." I'm like,
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I just held off. Anyway, since I haven't said what it is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. And prior to this, I had read another. We had both read
devoured.
No Exit by Taylor Adams, which was fantastic.
That was a
good thriller.
I stayed up until I remember finishing No Exit. It was at 3-something in the morning because I stayed up. It was
On a
like
work night.
I stayed up because I had to finish where it was going.
It was really, really compelling. And after that, we bought his next book,
Hairpin Bridge.
Hairpin Bridge. We both started it. We both loved it, but then I think we got away from it. It was COVID. We ended up not. Ironically, we were stuck inside like everyone else, but we didn't do a lot of reading.
Yeah,
and we were.
It was like a weird like year and a half where we hardly read at all, and then we finally got back into our old reading selves.
Yeah, and then we both thought this one sounded good because we're both writers, and obviously we're both readers. And this book, it's called The Last Word. It is basically, it's a psychological thriller like Taylor's other books that follows Emma Carpenter, who I'm not going to say that. I shouldn't have put this in there. She is in a remote beachfront house on the Washington coast. It's not her home. She is sort of like a caretaker for a few months of this place, where basically she's just got to like report to the owner if there's leaks and stuff like that. So she's there with her dog.
She's kind of in an interesting place in her
She's
life,
in an
which is
interesting
why
place in her life.
she's kind of needing that place.
Yeah, she's kind of having to start her life over again. She's kind of in between just life, I guess, you know. And one of the things that she does to pass time is she devours books. She'll read like multiple books a day. And she does a lot of ebooks, self-published books, and she reads this one book. It's a thriller, and it's brutal thriller where it's basically from the killer's point of view, and this killer is like stalking these two women. And Emma reads this and she just hates it. She despises the book. She despises everything about it. She thinks it's very contrived. And she's like, well, should I like to leave reviews on books. Should I do that for this? She's reluctant to do it, but she does it, and she tears it apart. She tears it apart, and there had been no other reviews for this book at this point. Almost immediately after she leaves this review, she gets a reply from the author. And the author is seemingly polite at first, saying, I appreciate you leaving the review, but, I worked really hard on this. And it's going to hurt me that you have, I'm paraphrasing, obviously. They say it much better in the book. It's going to hurt my sales and all my hard work that you left this bad review. People aren't going to want to buy it. So could you please take it down? And she sees that and she's like, kind of appalled at that, saying, authors shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. This is my opinion. I have the right to...
She gets in a tit for tat with him.
It goes back and forth. And each time in this back and forth, the author gets nasty with her, where it's kind of...
Nastier and nastier.
Nastier and nastier, where it's like borderline threatening.
Yeah.
And that ends, or at least pauses for a while, and then things start happening around this beach house that she's in, where she starts feeling like someone might be in the bedroom with her at night, watching her, and there's just other things happening outside of the house. And to add on to things, she's got this character that lives nearby her.
So weird.
Yeah, who she's never met in person. He's like the next beach house down. They communicate through whiteboards.
Yeah,
they'll leave the little messages on these whiteboards back and forth. He's an older gentleman. She knows his name is Deke. But you start to wonder, what's Deke's story? Because they play hangman.
Yes.
Back and forth.
Yes.
The little hangman, and they have this relationship, but he's mysterious. There's no one else around. I mean, like I said, they're really isolated, and
just what you want for a thriller.
Yeah. And shit keeps happening in her house where she feels like she's being watched, and boy, things really develop from there, where then things get
really weird
and really complex and dangerous. And you meet some other characters along the way who it's one of those books where not everyone is maybe what they initially seem, as you'll see in most thrillers or mysteries, because obviously they want to give you some stuff to make you think, what the heck's going on?
Maybe it's them, maybe it's them, no, maybe it's this.
Right, exactly. And it's so cleverly written. There's there's a couple points in the book where you think the story might even be over with.
Yeah.
But then you see you've got several chapters ahead of you, and you're like, well, now what?
Yeah.
And it's really good. It's really, really good. But like I said earlier, before I read this, I had read Holmes is Missing. And I kept setting that one aside. I liked it, but I kept setting it aside. This one I did not set aside. I think it just took me 3 or 4 days to read this one. Not whole days. I didn't sit there for like 72 hours. But you know what I mean, the reading sessions. Well, some people...
It's really slow reader.
Were really slow.
It took him a day just to get through the title.
But anyway, obviously I love this book. I can't say enough good things about it. Now I want to go back and... go back to the book that we both need to go back to, Hairpin Bridge.
Now, to tell you, if you're not familiar with Taylor Adams, he's another one that is an auto buy for me because he so far has not let me down. I need to go back to Hairpin Bridge as well. But here's a trademark that I think is really telling about an author in a book, which is if you get pulled away from something for some reason, and I'm talking about like for years.
Yeah.
And yet you still remember pretty vividly where you're at and what is happening.
Yes.
I can tell you exactly where I was in that book and what was happening up until that point, even now. Yeah. There are other books that are just fine, that I enjoyed totally reading, that I even rated 5-star reviews, that if you asked me about now that I read 10 years ago, I might be like, But there's just some authors who really kind of like stick with their stories, stick with you. And he's good.
He's really good.
Really good.
And I'm the same way. I remember exactly where I was in Hairpin Bridge. And damn it, I gotta get back to that one soon.
It's on my list for this year. Yeah.
Now speaking of reading, we're both reading other books right now. And well, I'm sorry, I kind of like jumped on your storyline there, but you are reading The Mystery Guest.
Yes, The Mystery Guest is next. I started that. Can I share what I did today?
Yes.
So,
we have a great bookstore near us.
I mean, I also want to say, like, we have a lot of books on Kindle, which doesn't take up physical space, but we do not live in a big house. We have a pretty moderately sized apartment. And by moderately, I mean like maybe 1,000 square foot, and a lot of it is hallway. a lot of it is hallway. So we have to be very creative in how we shelve books, but somehow we have several hundred books here, and I just can't stop. So, anyways, one of my favorite local bookstores called Huxley and Hero.
Huxley and Hero on Market Street in Wilmington.
On Market Street in Wilmington. I work in Wilmington off of Market Street. So today during lunch, I actually took a lunch today. I was wearing these cute little boots, and they were really cute. They were just fine for being in the office. And I thought, they're just a couple blocks away, so I'm going to walk there. We walk there all the time
from our home, but
in sneakers. But I forgot it was actually more like 9 blocks away. So I have horrific blisters, but it was worth every step because they had shared the other day on their Instagram channel a book called The Literary Cats coloring book by Andrew Schaefer. And some of you, I was shocked because I was like, oh, Andrew Schaefer, he's written kind of like political mystery comedy things that feature like Biden. Yeah,
he did this. He had a couple of books that was Joe Biden and Barack Obama before Biden became president. Yeah. Where they were solving mysteries together. Yeah. Hope Never Dies.
And Feel the Burn with Bernie in it, which I need to read that as well. And he's married to an author. I didn't even realize this till I was looking in here today. He's married to another author, Meg Schaefer.
Yes,
and I can picture book covers with her name on it. But if you ask me me to tell you what a title is, I couldn't right now.
But this seems much different than what we know him for.
This is a coloring book, because I guess he does children's books too, and he's an illustrator. He has drawn all of these pictures.
I did not know
in here.
that.
And so we like cats. So it's about it's like literary versions of it's a cat versions of literary icons. Like for instance, instead of Edgar Allan Poe, this is really what got me to buy this. Edgar Allan Toe Beans.
I'll show his picture again. Edgar Allan Toe Beans.
Edgar Allan Toe Beans.
Oh my God, that's adorable.
I mean, so I got some new coloring pencils that are supposed to be delivered tonight, and I'll be see George R.R. Mittens.
Oh my God, that's fantastic! Like George R.R. Martin.
There's just a lot of things.
Oh, I love that.
Fangston Hughes.
Okay, that's really adorable.
But anyway, so I got that. I'm really excited. So thank you, Huxley and Hero. And then
this.
Oh my gosh, Raising Hair.
That's wonderful.
And I had seen this book cover, because it's kind of a striking book cover. Again, on all these channels that I'm constantly bombarded with writing. And I was intrigued by it just because I thought the cover was so simplistic and yet gorgeous.
Oh, it is. It's beautiful.
So imagine my surprise when I went to go pick up my coloring book, and this was right at the front of the store.
Wow.
So I knew nothing about it. I opened it up and read the blurb, and it is about, it's a memoir. It's written by Chloe Dalton. She's a writer, political advisor, and foreign policy specialist. She spent more than a decade working in the UK Parliament and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and has advised and written for and with numerous prominent figures. And so she's in England. But this memoir is based on her time during the pandemic, where she was in her home in the English countryside, which is, obviously probably pretty isolated. And she came across a baby hare that was about ready to get attacked by a dog, and she kind of got it and brought it in because she was worried about it, and she brought it into her house, and she basically was trying to figure out how to raise a hare, which from what I will learn and what they tease in the blurb is a very difficult thing to do, that they often don't survive. Well, not only did this hare survive, but it became like her friend. It was following her around the house, and
amazing.
then she didn't want to confine it to the house because that's adverse to their nature, even though she wanted the hare to be with her all the time, so she would let it out. But the hare kept coming back to her.
Oh, wow.
So it would run to her house through the fields around there to come back to her, and it's supposed to be just kind of like a reflective journey of how this happened in her life. But then also she shares tidbits and information about hares and their kind of place in the natural world, and
wow.
And I'm just really this
really sounds wonderful. It's not something that I would think initially that I'd have an interest in reading, but boy, that just sounds wonderful.
And then
marvelous.
Another one of my both of our favorite authors, Matt Haig, he was on the front here saying, "I will be recommending this to everyone." Okay, well, when you love an author that much, and Matt really writes some stuff that gets to your heart and all that.
Yeah.
He's such
Midnight
a great
Library.
I just
like
love
that.
it.
Yeah, he's great.
When he tells you he loves stuff like this,
exactly.
First of all, I believe him. I know he wasn't just paid to write that.
No, he's
anyways, I'm excited about
those
it.
both look great. Oh my gosh, that coloring book. I know you're going to be coloring tonight, probably as soon as we finish with our show.
Yeah, and I get my streak of reading in.
Oh yes, because that's one. I don't know. We mentioned that earlier, but you could do streaks on.
Not like I don't like read naked. Because nobody needs that. Our cat would be scarred for life, but
oh my heavens, you were really something.
And also he might be. We've been married a while.
Oh, Lisa, you're really something. I was trying to get to the darn cover here of this book.
Oh, so I can help you.
Okay, you do that.
Oh,
she's helping me. I love you, by the way.
I love you. Cover.
Yay! The book that I am reading right now, I'm about halfway through. Oh, thanks. That's nice. Is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This came out. Gosh, I probably should have wrote that down, but I think it's a couple years old now. Andy Weir is probably best known for being the author of The Martian, which was a very, very popular book.
We have that one too.
We do have that one.
In print.
Yes, we have that one in print. That's probably close to 10 years old. That had been a very popular. I think he self-published that initially, and then it got such a big following. Then he got a traditional publisher. And
I almost bought the I'm probably going to get the Audible book first because I have a bunch of credits about ready to burn my pocket. And because Will Wheaton, I got to tell you, if you have not listened to a book narrated by Will Wheaton, you need to hurry up and do that. Like Ready Player One, all that. He's an amazing narrator. He really,
I have not listened to him. But
like narrators can make books. They can make or break them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think of like beautifully. Oh my God! Remarkably Bright Creatures.
Yes.
That book we have in print, but I initially listened to it in Audible, and it was dual narrated. And I haven't read the print version yet, but the Audible was a masterpiece. So I am curious to see what it is like. Our neighbor read the actual print version, and she kind of came away with the same thing. But I told her, listen to the audio. We're actually going to see that author in April because she's coming to Wilmington, and we're going to that talk.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Anyways, really long sidetrack.
What book was I talking about? I'm kidding. No, I appreciate
Project Hail Mary.
It was cute. Project Hail Mary. But anyway, The Martian, I had started reading it, however many years ago, and I think I was struggling with that one. It's I know, like I said, very, very popular. Then it was the book was popular. Then it was a very popular movie starring Matt Damon. I didn't want to see the movie until I had read the book, so I still have not watched the movie. But I started reading it. I loved it at first, but then it was very, very heavy on a lot of like scientific type stuff, which is fine. I sometimes struggle with that. I have ADHD, so sometimes that is hard for me to focus on. And while there were other compelling elements of the story, very, very compelling elements and very good storytelling, I struggled and I put the book aside. Now, having said that, after getting into this book, Project Hail Mary, there is still scientific stuff in there. I think that's Andy Weir's thing. And there were parts in the beginning, especially where I was struggling. But then probably around 25% into it, I really started getting into the story. And just one interesting thing was happening after another. Like I said, I'm about around the halfway point, thoroughly enjoying it, to the point where I want to go and get the audiobook now of The Martian. And I would give a shout out to my friend Deanna. She had recommended this book. She had read it recently and she posted about it on Goodreads. So thank you, Deanna. You turned me on to this book. She loves it. She read it, but she wants to go and listen, I think, to she wants to buy another copy of it and even get the audiobook of it. It's great when books get a hold of you that way, where you want to own multiple copies of it and just you already know that you want to reread it or listen to it again at some point. So I'm thoroughly enjoying that right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I hope to finish that in the next few days. And then after that, my plan is to read Finders Keepers.
Oh, yes.
Which is
Mr. Mercedes.
It's the second book in that series, which I can't remember the exact name of the series, but it's the follow-up to Mr. Mercedes, which is their Stephen King books. So
and it's got Holly in it, right?
Holly is a character we met in Mr. Mercedes. She is there's this trilogy first, and then there's other books where I think Holly is the central character. Well, I think there's some where she's a supporting character, but then there was a book called Holly where she was the central figure, and apparently she's going to even be in another one later this year. So, and I like to read these kinds of things in order. Like there was what's the short story compilation I read last year by King?
It had a cat on it, didn't it?
Yeah.
Something blood.
Yeah.
Something if it bleeds. If it bleeds. Yes.
There were 4 novellas in that, and I read 3 of them, loved them, but I told myself I am not reading the other one because Holly was a character in that. Yeah. And I knew I wanted to not read that until I had read time-wise the things that came before that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I really liked Holly as a character in Mr. Mercedes. I know she's not the main character in the next book or any in the initial 3, but I'm really excited about Finders Keepers because Mr. Mercedes is great. If you haven't read Mr. Mercedes, I'm not like Mr. Big Stephen King fan. I think I've read maybe a total of 5 of his books, and I've liked them all, but I'm not like other people I know who have to buy his books the day they come out.
And here's me. I really had read Nothing.
Nothing.
But then I bought all of it just about of Stephen King.
Well, not all of his books, because he's got like 152 books out.
Okay, maybe not that many.
But still,
but like all of the ones that I saw that looks interesting.
Well,
to
sort
me.
of like what you said earlier about the whole series thing. Like you saw Mr. Mercedes and thought, "Hey, this looks good." Found out that was the first of a trilogy. Then found out there was another book that was related to it called The Institution with the Holly character.
That's the one that I started, The Institution.
Oh, okay.
And I really enjoyed
Yeah.
it. But then I think I got sidetracked with school or something like that.
And you have another one that you started to read. Wasn't it something about a fable?
Oh,
or...
yes. That's over there next to my chair on the list that definitely will get read this on the top pile that will get read this year before it topples over on me. That Stephen King wrote as a gift to himself during COVID.
Oh, okay. It's more of like a fantasy.
Yeah, it's
type,
more of a fantasy thing, and he pretty much said this is not the fairy tale. He said this is not at all like anything that I've ever. I had massive respect for him for this, because he said it's not at all like anything else that I've written, and basically I don't really care if anyone else likes it. I wrote it for myself, so I just did it.
I admire that.
And I was
love
like,
when he just does what he wants to do.
I honestly think that that's a message that everybody should do, by the way. Like if you're not just writer, but in life, don't let other people's definitions or pictures of things make you think that your life and your dreams should be anything but what you want them to be.
Exactly.
And I think that that's, an important, message. I have to say, I sometimes felt some sort of way about him because some of the quotes that were used from him, he seemed a little cocky. And and also he seemed like this writing master that couldn't write anything but 1,000-page books. And I was like,
they're
okay,
intimidating.
I was like, well, maybe you could learn how to pare it down a little bit.
Yeah.
But this was also coming from someone who had never read anything from him, so I've gotten over that. I'm older, and I'm I don't know, a little bit different.
A little wiser.
Sort of, sometimes.
Well, I really think you'd love Mr. Mercedes.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Yeah.
It's really something.
Once I finish cleaning rooms at hotels that have dead people in them, I'll move on to that.
Well, you know what? We're going to wrap this one up. There was something else we wanted to talk about, wasn't there?
We talked about Fable. I think that was the main
Fable was
thing.
the big thing.
I think we said we might talk about what we've been watching.
Oh, yeah, and I think we already did that, too. We're going to watch
Severance. And we just watched the finale. We need to watch the reunion show, but the finale of Traitors.
Yeah, it couldn't be two more different TV shows.
Oh, my God, if you want to hear me read, come on. I did that in our show, our other show that we recently did. And because, that's what's going to make you jump over to that show is to hear me, who you don't really know who I am at all.
Say the exact same thing as she just said here.
Well, no, I was dedicated to it. I printed out the entire thing and I read it.
Yes, you did.
Because I'm a reader.
I don't mean to sell you short.
Because I'm a reader.
You are a very good reader.
Yeah.
You're very good.
I like to mimic people's voices. Probably not very well. But I like to tell myself I do. And they're always male voices, so I don't really know what that says about.
Yeah, you do really good with...
There's very few female voices that I can do,
But she feels like she has to master it. Like, we've been watching The Floor starring Rob Lowe, and she's been working on a Rob Lowe impersonation, but she's not there yet, so she's still working on it.
Well, because he's really hi, welcome to The Floor. He kind of has,
spot on,
so see, it's the pressure. It's the camera. The camera helps me come alive. So, Hollywood, if you need someone to make interesting but horrible replications of other people who are much better's voices, honestly, I'm a jingle maker. Any pharmaceutical, I think I sing all the time.
Oh my God.
And I sing the most ridiculous.
Okay, you with that one commercial.
Story. Oh my God, but I learned the commercials too. Oh my God, I've got diabetes, but I'm managing it well. Yeah. It's a long story, but I've got something to tell. I can't remember. It's Jardiance. Take twice daily Jardiance.
Yeah, I could go on and on about her studying these commercials to get them exactly 100%.
But then I make my own jingles, and they're horrific. They're they don't make any sense whatsoever, and yet they get stuck in his head all the time.
Oh,
and I was
do,
I missed my mark. I should have come to pharmaceutical companies. I should get jobs at them. There's one right up the street. Insight should hire me to come up with names and jingles for the things that they create.
You hear that
because
inside?
they'll be horrible, but they're earworms. They're earworms. I make stupid songs for our cat. You know, he probably just hates his life, but actually he doesn't. He's very spoiled. He has 76 beds.
He loves his life. Yeah, it's not.
I've gotten
really
really off
76
topic
beds.
here, but this is
We do
this is
these
called
kind
the
of things.
Ramblin' Wagon Show. Okay, so we've
So-
spent an hour and a half talking.
We have, yeah.
Yeah.
At one point, we're like, we're going to do these in about 30, 45 minutes tops.
Yeah,
but-
you said that. I said an hour.
Yeah, well, if you've been here since the beginning, hey, thanks
Thank
for that.
you.
Yes, we really enjoyed, I don't know,
Being here with you.
being here with you. We did. And we're going to be back again soon. We're going to talk about different things. Last show we had done, we talked about, I guess it was all about movies, right? Or TV shows. I think it was TV shows we were watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
then-
we floated the idea just before we started this
Oh,
show
yeah.
about doing Buddy, posts his shows on Substack a lot. I'm on Substack, and I do have a newsletter called Beyond the Margins, which is basically talking about pretty much everything in life just outside of the scope of looking at it in normal terms. Writing, life, reading, school, just emotions, all that kind of stuff. But anyways, we talked about potentially trying a live show. He used to do live shows on Google Hangouts and YouTube.
Yeah, they were up on YouTube. That's the only place I really did my show. I didn't have an audio version of the show back then, but this one there's audio versions. There's the video version on YouTube and now on Substack. But yeah, we're both new to Substack, and so we want to start doing the podcast here. Still on YouTube and all those other places, but on Substack, you can do live videos.
Live videos where people can join in.
Yeah.
And there's no fee to join Substack or to view or interact with anything that we're doing. None of our newsletters require fees. It's all free.
Certainly people can do that and do that.
But we were thinking about doing a live show kind of focused on writing that we would encourage other writers to come in. So so maybe look to subscribing to one or both of us, and we'll try to pan that out, mainly about struggles of being a writer, our individual struggles of being writers, because I think obviously writers talk about that to some length, but I think it's important just in life in general to not always boast all the things that you're great about, but to also kind of talk about the things that you have struggles with, because it helps other people, one, not feel alone, and also realize that artists are very interesting creatures.
That's for sure.
A
lot of insecurities and
it's a very inward process. Like, to write, we have to do it ourselves and alone, and I think it's really important to build on that writing community and draw people in to say, hey, look, don't let these things that you might think you're alone in experiencing derail your process or hope of ever finishing a book or writing a story at all, because you're not alone. It's a horrible thing to realize that you're going to struggle no matter what when you write, but you're not going to be alone doing it, and just find your individual way of overcoming those things. So we're going to have maybe a live discussion about different individual
I love
things
the idea
and just kind of talking about it.
Exactly. You don't have to be a writer to be into anyone who's artistic at all. I think might be able to appreciate
and being a writer. Even if you dream about becoming a writer and the thought of becoming a writer derails you in some way, we're talking to you.
Exactly.
Everybody can write.
Yeah.
Everybody can.
We've all been, taking in stories our whole lives, whether it's through books or movies or television, so if you think you want to tell a story, you probably can. You might need some help along the way.
And different people are going to have, if you see someone else who's unbelievably great, like I would say one of my natural strengths is description. Probably because I started writing poetry when I was a child. So description, especially flowery, lyrical prose, has always been very easy for me. But I struggled with dialogue, making dialogue not sound like, 18th century England or something like that, So everybody has their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to that. And some people are going to be wildly talented in everything, and it's going to come to them easily. But writing is one of the amazing things that even with music, cooking, anybody can learn to do it. Yes, your limits of where you can go with it might be different than somebody else's, but don't let the difficulty of the process challenge you to the point where you don't don't
Yeah.
make it happen.
Exactly.
Because not doing it is worse than,
that's
than
true.
doing it.
And I know that's something that I've dealt with, because I still have not finished a book, but I've started several. I'm working on one now that, damn it, I'm going to finish it. This is going to be the one that I finish, because I think an important thing for anyone, whether it's writing books or making music or painting or anything artistic, is having the passion for it. And it's something that you feel like you have to do it. And that's where I am right now, and it's exciting. So anyway, we're going to talk about all these different kinds of things in one of these live shows.
About writing. So if you like writing, or reading, or creating, or you know people, follow us.
Follow
both
us.
of us. And
we'll post about it beforehand, letting you know when it is, and you can watch the live show or watch the playback of it.
And I'm on Instagram. If you're there, I'm Lisa M. Gott Writes. And I'm also on Blue Sky, Lisa M. Gott. And
I'm in those places too. So, look for us. We're everywhere.
Yes.
And thank you so much for being a part of the Pop and Prose show. And I hope you have a great day doing whatever the heck it is you're doing. So just enjoy yourself.
Enjoy. Bye.